Hey Misfits, it's Kate. I just wanted to jump on here before the start of the episode to say that Kevin and I are thinking about all those who've been affected by the LA fires. We obviously talk a lot about the city. Many, if not all of our episode topics have connections to that area, and we know we have a lot of listeners that reside in Los Angeles. It's also the place I called home for nearly a decade. I have friends that have been forced to evacuate, others with their bags packed and ready to go. There are hundreds of people who have lost their homes, their pets, their businesses, possessions that held sentimental value, and some have lost their lives. At the time I'm recording this, it's Saturday night, January 11th. The largest fire, the Palisades fire, is only 11% contained, and as the winds pick up and shift direction, neighborhoods previously considered safe are now in the danger zone. And Kevin and I know that a lot of you listening would like to help, so I'm putting some links in the show notes, and we encourage you to do your own research, see which reputable organizations are accepting donations, and what exactly it is that they need. And we can only hope that these fires are contained soon. All right, that's it, folks. On to today's episode.
Hi, Misfits. This is Kevin.
And this is Kate.
Welcome to Horrorwood.
Whoop, whoop. Did you sing badonkadonk?
I did.
I loved it. I've got yet another case involving a Ziegfeld Follies girl.
Kate,
I'm in my Ziegfeld Follies era.
Right. You're just like, you looked up the roster of all the Ziegfeld Follies girls, and you're like,
I was like,
you have a story. You have a story.
I don't know what is making me gravitate towards them so much right now, but I just think they're fascinating.
I think it's fascinating as well.
Also, just that time period, there's a whole lot happening. So that's what we've got today.
All right, bring it on.
We're talking about Bessie Poole and her death at age 33, which was officially listed as being from natural causes, but there's a lot of speculation surrounding it.
Doubtful.
Especially since the people that were questioned in the citywide criminal investigation into her death, many gave conflicting reports as to the events that took place just hours before she died. So let's learn more about Bessie.
Oh my God.
She was born Elizabeth Chatterton Poole.
Chatterton Poole.
On June 25th, 1895 in Onset, Massachusetts, which is about an hour south of Boston.
Okay.
I've seen some bloggers say she was from Boston, and I don't know why that drove me so crazy. But according to the Boston Globe, she was born in Onset. And I was like, well, if that's where she was born, then why don't we just say that? It's like when people here are like, where are you from? And someone will be like, Chicago. And then a person will be like, okay, but really, where are you from? And they're like, Kankakee. You know what I mean? It's like,
or they're like Aurora. And it's like, that's so far removed.
It's like, no, honey.
It's like you're from 2 hours away. You're not from Chicago.
But she was from Onset. And Onset is a tiny community. According to the census website, in 2022, it had a population of just over 1,300. So that number was much smaller back then when Bessie was growing up. Mm-hmm. Side note, Onset was developed in the late 1800s as a meeting place for spiritualists. So people would come from other parts of the state to listen to mediums communicate with the dead.
In Onset,
Massachusetts. That was the entire purpose this town was developed.
That's insane.
Isn't that wild? Bessie's parents were Louis Poole and Elizabeth Chase, who also went by Bessie. So a Lorelei Roy Gilmore situation. Mother and daughter had the same name. Bessie had an older brother, Wallace Rexford Poole, who was just a couple of years older than she was. Okay. The Pooles were not a wealthy family by any stretch, and at some point Bessie's parents divorced and each eventually remarried. Bessie is described as being free-spirited and funny. It seems like she was really easygoing. She had black curly hair, a, quote, charming smile, and long legs, which were an asset in her career later as a dancer. When Bessie was 16 years old, so this would be around 1911, she just decided, I'm done with school.
I wish I could have made that decision.
In a book I read while prepping this episode, author Nils Hanson describes her as, quote, a star-struck high school dropout. It sounds like she was looking for something a little more exciting than what Onset had to offer. She dropped out, moved to New York City on her own,
Wow.
and began pursuing a career as a dancer.
Hey, dancing all her way to the city.
Luckily, it worked out for her because it doesn't always go that way.
As we know.
Yeah, she was really talented. One of the girls she danced with described her as being the best one in their group.
Boosh.
And it wasn't long before she caught the eye of none other than Flo Ziegfeld Jr.
Oh, Ziegfeld.
Ziegfeld.
You silly bitch. Welcome in.
Silly bitch. Ziegfeld said, hey, you're attractive and you can dance and you also probably have great ankles because that's really important to me. So do you want to be in my show? And Bessie said, duh. So in 1915, Bessie joined the Ziegfeld Follies.
There we are. She's here.
She's here. She's dancing.
She's dancing her way to success.
This was a huge boost to her career, obviously.
Yeah.
But 1915 was monumental in other ways because that same year, her brother Wallace died at the age of 21.
No.
Leaving behind a wife and 2 children.
No, what happened?
I haven't been able to find his cause of death.
Okay.
He might have been killed in World War I.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe he died in an accident. It's unclear. I couldn't find it anywhere.
We can speculate wildly.
And in December of that year, Bessie's dad, Louis, remarried. He was the first of her parents to remarry, so I can only imagine how it must have affected her to lose her brother, gain a stepmom, and have the biggest professional achievement of her life occur all in the same year.
Yeah.
1950 wasn't just Bessie's Follies debut, but also comedian W.C. Fields. He became a featured performer in the review. And if you're trying to picture him, he's the one with the rhinophema. He had the red bulbous nose.
Big old nose.
Fields had been a successful vaudeville performer. He gained popularity as a juggler primarily, and then began incorporating comedy into his act. From vaudeville, the next career stepping stone for many performers was a Broadway review, like The Follies.
There we go.
Because that could sometimes catapult them to the next level, such as a Broadway show or film. So when Fields joins the cast, he's thinking, hey, I'm moving up. Also in The Follies was actress Lillian Lorraine. Sometimes her name is written as Ellaline, like in your William Terrace episode.
Lady Ellaline.
It's all I can think about. I had never heard that name before you mentioned it in that episode, and then all of a sudden I started seeing it everywhere. I love that. Ellaline. Ziegfeld had fallen madly in love with Lillian, like he did with many of his female performers. She had left the show for a few years, but then came back, and she and Bessie became best friends. Lillian plays a major role in Bessie's life and death.
Oh, shit.
Spoilers. In 1916, Bessie had a featured role in one of the Follies numbers, and W.C. Fields would watch from the wings. And according to fellow dancer Faye O'Neill, when Bessie and Fields locked eyes, it was an instant connection. Butterflies in the stomach, birds singing, hearts pounding. He's immediately attracted to her. Not just for her looks, but also her humor. She was really quick-witted, and as I mentioned before, easygoing. She was a free spirit. All the things his wife was not, according to him.
And those strong ankles.
I told you about that, right?
You did. No,
Yeah.
I was just thinking, like, I just imagine she has these, like, big muscular
Good old ankles.
And he's like, hey.
Gotta have them.
And she's like, clackety clack.
Yeah, it turns out W.C. Fields was still technically married when he met Bessie, though he and his wife were estranged.
Sure. Really?
They were.
Okay.
Fields,
Because I feel like that's something that men say. They're like, yeah, it's
we're
almost
totally
over.
estranged. No, they were definitely estranged and had been for a few years by that point.
Okay.
Fields met his wife, Hattie Hughes, on the vaudeville circuit. She was a chorus girl. They got married in 1900, which when I wrote that, I was like, that's not a year. Because it feels like it should be like 1902 or 1912,
Right.
19 something.
We forget about old 1900.
Old 1900 back there. And she became part of his vaudeville act. Hattie not only assisted him on stage, but she did something that quite literally opened up his entire world, his life, his career. She taught him to read and write.
Oh, shit.
Whereas Hattie was well educated, Field's education didn't go past grade school. And when he was in school, his attendance was sporadic.
Okay.
So while they were touring the vaudeville circuit together, in their downtime, she would tutor him. Thanks to her influence, he became an avid reader and began writing his own sketches. In 1904, they welcome a son, W.C. Fields Jr., who went by Claude, which was his middle name. After their son was born, Hattie was ready to put show business aside and focus on her family, and she wanted her husband to do the same. But Fields continued touring with his vaudeville act, which of course kept him away from home a lot, and Hattie was not into being a single mom while her husband was on the road. She kept telling him, it's time to stop touring. I need you here. I want you to get a steady job and settle down. Like, we have a family to raise now. And Fields said, why don't you and Claude come with me on the road? But Hattie had no interest in that. Neither of them would budge, and Fields told her, I have no intention of giving up show business, so if you're asking me to choose between our life together and my career, I choose my career.
That's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I see both sides of it, but when you offer a solution and Hattie's not willing to budge, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, maybe there was other stuff going on between them as well.
Yeah,
we don't know.
We don't know.
But also, Fields wasn't super into kids, so I think that might have played into it.
And he's checking out all these dancers. The wandering eye.
Yeah. So they end up separating, and there was a lot of resentment on both sides. But they never divorced because Fields was a devout Roman Catholic. Divorce was out of the question. So he was technically a married man when he met Bessie Poole.
Gotcha.
Bessie and Fields were instantly infatuated with each other. He was 15 years her senior, but back then that was nothing really. Their relationship wasn't a secret. Everybody knew that they were seeing each other. At the New Amsterdam Theater, which was home to Ziegfeld's Follies, the chorus girls all shared a dressing room, of course.
Yeah.
And in Bessie's spot, on any given day, there were flowers, gifts, bottles of perfume, all from W.C. Fields.
Wow.
Despite him being married, it didn't really seem scandalous because, like I said, he and Hattie were estranged. Plus, all the other girls were sleeping with Ziegfeld anyway, so, no one really cared. There were a lot of showmances going on back then.
Oh, my God.
In between seasons of the Follies, Bessie accompanied Fields on the road with his vaudeville act, kind of like Hattie used to do. She would act on stage with him in his sketches, and they were hot and heavy from the beginning, spending all their time together, touring together. And it wasn't long before Bessie discovered she was pregnant. The Follies wasn't exactly known for its pregnant chorus girls.
Hey, listen, there should have been an offshoot performance.
Would have paid money to see it.
Yeah, of all the pregnant Follies girls.
Yes.
Come on. Come on.
Get happy. Ba-da-ba-da-ba. I don't know the lyrics to that. So,
you could do so much with that. Like, they stop and then you hear, I don't know. You hear little baby feet. I don't know.
It's like you hear water breaking. I don't understand where this is going.
Yes, Kate. At the end, it's like a surprise of whose water breaks.
Oh, my. Again, would pay money to see that show.
Same, $100.
So Bessie had to leave the Follies, unfortunately. She and Fields kept the pregnancy a secret from most. Not even her parents knew that she had a baby. Their son was born on August 15th, 1917, and they named him William after W.C., Rexford after Bessie's brother, Fields Morris. They added the surname Morris so that legally he was William, or Bill as he was called, Morris, and people wouldn't associate him with W.C.
Isn't William Morris
an agent, which ironically was W.C.'s agent, but he didn't name him after his agent.
Okay.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah. Wasn't there something William Morris with cigarettes?
I don't know.
Maybe I'm wrong.
On the baby's birth certificate, they listed the name of the father as William R. Morris. W.C. wanted nothing to do with his new son and reportedly never even looked at him when he was born.
That's awful.
Fields was adamant that he was not going to let a child interrupt his career. He's thinking, how dare this baby that I helped create think he can just be born and make me take responsibility for him? Preposterous. He's like, I already left one son behind. You don't think I'm going to leave this one behind too?
Oh my God. How many others are out there?
Just those two that we know of. The thing is, Bessie also wanted to focus on her career. For one thing, she couldn't let it get out that she'd had a baby without being married because that was not the look back then. And she didn't have much money of her own, so she knew she couldn't afford to raise him. She felt the best option was to give him up, which of course also had to be done in secret. So she went to her friend, Lorraine, who had a friend who had a sister-in-law who did not have a baby and wanted one. This woman was Rose Holden, and she and her husband, Ed, took in little baby Bill and raised him as their own. So he actually grew up as Bill Holden.
Oh, okay. What if I was like, oh, Kate, I forgot to tell you. And then out of my bag, I pulled out a baby. And I was like, I bought this the other day.
So that's what that smell was. There's no smell. I was just joking.
I was like, you didn't hear that. You were downstairs when I farted. No, I'm kidding. Right,
I don't smell anything.
Good.
Despite wanting no relationship with his son, Fields did send checks to the Holdens every now and then for the first 10 years of the boy's life to help support his upbringing. Bill never knew his biological mother, Bessie, which is unfortunate, and it wasn't until he was a teenager that he was told who his biological father was. By the time Bill learned of his background, Bessie had already passed away. And by this point, W.C. Fields was living out in California. Bill naturally wanted to meet him.
Yeah.
This is his biological dad, and he's a star. I'd want to meet him if I was in Bill's position. There's an interview online, which I'll link, from 2012, where Bill, aged 94 at that time, talks about this meeting.
Wow.
First off, he is the sweetest sounding, most adorable man ever. And everything that I've read about him just says that he was just the nicest guy.
Good.
And he talks about making the journey from New Jersey, where he was living at the time, to California when he was around 18. Mm-hmm. He went with a couple of friends, and he says when he got there, there were several people at the house, so it's not like he could have a private one-on-one conversation with Fields. And on his journey out west, they had traveled through West Virginia, where every time I say West Virginia, I'm like, Kevin?
Yeah.
Where Bill said his feet froze. He didn't have the proper shoes or something. Unfortunately, this interview is in shortened clips, so parts are missing. And this tidbit came up in Bill's conversation with Fields. So Fields found a pair of fur-lined boots and $300 and gave it to Bill. And then he sent Bill on his way. He was just like, here's some shoes, bye. That's a long journey to take to meet your father without getting to have a real conversation with him. But Bill says this was before DNA testing, so he couldn't really prove that he was Fields' son. I do think he told Fields, like, hey, I'm your son. But in this interview clip, that part is kind of glossed over.
Oh, okay.
In the book I mentioned earlier, which is actually a book on Lillian Lorraine, but has info on Fields and Bessie, this meeting went a little differently. In the book, according to Fields' good friend Eddie Sutherland, the bell rang at the gate to Fields' house, and his butler went down to answer it because he's a rich bitch.
Yeah.
The butler comes back up and says to Fields, your son is here to see you. And Fields shouted, tell him to go away. So the butler goes back down to the gate to tell Bill to leave. But that's when he and his friends mentioned they had traveled all the way across the country. Mm-hmm. The butler goes back up and says, Mr. Fields, he came all the way from the east to see you. And he really pushed for Fields to let him in. So Fields was like, fine, whatever. The butler brings Bill up, and he and Fields didn't have much to say to one another. There were others there, as Bill mentioned in that interview, so they just kind of made small talk. And then Fields says to him, you say you're my son. What are your credentials? Show me something. Bill pulls out his driver's license, which would have had the name William Rexford Fields Morris, because that's what was on his birth certificate. And according to Eddie Sutherland's account, Fields looked at the license and said, get out of here. And he threw him out. That is the only time Bill ever saw his biological father. He did write to Fields a few years later in 1941 just to update him on his life. He let him know he was a corporal in the army, that he'd gotten married, and he was around 24 at this time. Mm-hmm. And in response, Fields sent him $100 and an autographed picture.
Oh my God, this guy is a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
He's such a jerk.
I know I went on a little bit of a tangent, but I wanted to tell you about Bessie's child.
No, it's good to know. Of course.
Give a little bit more info there. Give you a fuller picture.
No, I get it. But like, it sucks on both ends that they were both such selfish people.
Back to 1917. Without a child to get in the way of their ambitions, Bessie and Fields were free to pursue their careers. Fields got them an apartment at the St. Nicholas Hotel under the name Morris. The St. Nicholas was a huge luxury hotel on Broadway in Soho. It's gone now, but at that time, it was the creme de la creme.
Ooh, okay.
Marble columns, chandeliers, lots of walnuts and mahogany, very lavish. And Bessie returned to the Follies in 1918, while continuing to appear on stage with Fields in his vaudeville act, which had them touring different cities.
Yep.
They often performed in Boston, and whenever they were there, they would drive down to Onset to have dinner with Bessie's mom and stepdad. And of course, being in Massachusetts, they had all this fresh seafood. I read that their dinners often included sautéed sea scallops, clams. I imagine they were shucking oysters and eating shrimpies.
Oh, I want seafood now, Kate.
It sounded so good. Fields seemed to get along with Bessie's family. They, of course, had no idea about the secret baby. I imagine that might have changed their opinion on him a bit.
little bit.
Things were good between Bessie and Fields, never mind his wife and firstborn son. But Bessie didn't seem to have any grand dreams that Fields was going to divorce Hattie. It seems like she knew what she signed up for. Like she wasn't expecting a proposal or anything.
Sure.
They're living together, working together. They're about as married as you can be at this point. Fields was really supportive of Bessie during their first few years together. In 1921, when Bessie got into a salary dispute with Ziegfeld, Fields, who was one of the Follies' biggest stars, took Bessie's side. So Ziegfeld fired both of them.
Wow.
They still toured the vaudeville act for a while, but being let go from the Follies seems to be the first hairline crack in the relationship. One thing about W.C. Fields is that he loved to drink.
Yeah, he did.
According to him, he began drinking as a child.
Oh my God.
Just beer up until age 12, he said, and then he started drinking harder liquor. However, he embellished a lot of stories from his childhood, so I don't know how true that really is, but he was a heavy drinker, and it's eventually what killed him. From what I've read, Bessie wasn't a drinker prior to meeting Fields, but his influence on her led her to start drinking.
Oh, shit.
Like they're working together, they're on the road together, they're at home
drinking together, they're giving up kids together.
Exactly. Now that they're not in the Follies, they've got to find other work to supplement their vaudeville income, and this came much easier for Fields than it did for Bessie. He's the name. He's been a star in the most popular Broadway revue. He writes his own material. He's doing okay.
Yeah, he's fine.
Bessie, on the other hand, doesn't have those credits under her belt. She's been a dancer in a chorus of many dancers.
She should have done like an act where she got boards, like 2x4s, and like cracked them in half with her strong ankles. Could you imagine?
I love it.
Crunch.
Again, I would pay to see that show.
Kate. So what I'm hearing is we need to open a cheese
mobster.
Cheese mobster. We need to create a show where pregnant women dance and break boards with their ankles.
While eating cheese. Oh my God, we could combine the two.
It's a dinner theater.
I love this.
We have opportunities for everybody.
Boom. All inclusive. In 1923, Fields goes on to star in a very popular Broadway show called Poppy, which really legitimized him in the eyes of the industry and relaunched his film career. He also went on tour with Poppy, so he's away from Bessie a lot and meets another attractive chorus girl. I don't think this is the only time he's cheated on Bessie, but I do think she still loved him and wanted to be with him. Fields seemed to have other ideas, however. He decides to send Bessie on a trip to Europe. He's like, babe, I think you deserve a vacation. How does Europe sound? And she's like, oh my God, yes, I would love for us to go away together. And he's like, oh, no. Not me. Just you.
Just you, honey pie.
And she's like, what? He's like, yeah, the thing is I've been seeing this other girl. And with you here, it's kind of harshing my vibe. So could you just go away for a bit? So she did. She went to Europe. I feel like she was willing to accept a lot of crap from him because for whatever reason, she wanted to be with him. Her mother later said she was just crazy about him. And I feel like when you have stars in your eyes about a person, you're willing to forgive more than you probably should.
Uh-huh.
It's that thing of like, well, if I do what he wants, then maybe he'll come around. He'll see the error of his ways. But he didn't. When Bessie returned from Europe, Fields didn't seem to have any time for her. His film career was picking up despite drinking a reported 2 quarts of liquor a day.
2 quarts?
A day. And always showing up on set drunk.
Ah.
And his work commitments often had him going out to Los Angeles. However, he did send Bessie checks every now and then, sometimes like around $500 each to help her with her expenses because she's still struggling to find work.
Yeah.
And $500 back then is the equivalent of more than $9,000 today.
Oh, shucks.
But I don't know exactly how often he sent them. I do think the payments might have kept her hanging by a string, so to speak, and just kept her thinking or hoping that their relationship might get better.
Okay.
He was also still sending payments every now and then to the Holdens for Bill's expenses.
Okay.
Then in 1927, while Fields was in LA shooting a film for Paramount Pictures, he fell on set and broke his neck. Bessie reads about this in the paper and is like, oh shit, I hope he's okay. So she sends him a telegram expressing her concern and wants to check and see if he's all right. And he ignored her.
This guy is such an ass.
He really is. That November, Bill, now 10 years old, had to be hospitalized. I couldn't find why. November in 1927, I'm thinking pneumonia, the flu, but I'm not sure. His parents, Rose and Ed Holden, didn't have enough to cover the hospital bill, and Fields was ignoring Bessie, so she paid the bill herself.
Wow.
This was the tipping point for her. It was one thing to ignore her telegram, but to ignore the fact that the child you brought into the world is in the hospital and you don't offer any kind of support, she was like, nah.
No.
So Bessie gathers up all the letters Fields had written her over the years, proof of their relationship, proof they had a child together. She hires a lawyer, and she travels out to California.
Wow.
She threatened to sue if he didn't own up to his responsibilities, because their whole agreement had been he would financially support Bill's upbringing. But his payments had been sporadic. He didn't help with the hospital bill. He wasn't meeting his end of the bargain.
Yeah.
In retaliation, Fields got his own attorney and negotiated a deal with Bessie. He told her, I'll give you $20,000. There's just one condition. You have to sign this affidavit that reads, W.C. Fields is not the father of my child. This was not exactly what Bessie wanted to hear.
No.
Not only is he denying any parental responsibility or acknowledgement of Bill, but $20,000 really isn't that much money. Today, that's worth just over $360,000. Bill is only 10. Between sending the Holdens the money they would need plus Bessie's own expenses, that's going to go fast.
Yeah.
But she didn't feel like she had any other options, so she accepted the money and signed the affidavit. And she never saw W.C. Fields again.
Whoa. So that's the end of that.
That's the end of that. With her relationship definitively over and with no work opportunities lined up, she started drinking more and more.
Shit.
Every source I read stated she was a confirmed alcoholic.
Fuck.
A few months later, in September of 1928, Bessie was visiting a friend of hers in Massachusetts when she got word that her bestie, Lillian Lorraine's appendix burst, and she was in the hospital. So Bessie immediately went back to New York to be with her friend and actually moved in with Lillian at her apartment in the Dorset Hotel. She was like, I got you, girl, whatever you need. I'm here to help.
That's sweet.
Unfortunately, this act of goodwill is the beginning of a string of events that leads to Bessie's death at the age of 33.
Oh,
My best source for what I'm about to tell you next is the book I've been mentioning. It's called Lillian, Lorraine, The Life and Times of a Ziegfeld Diva by Nils Hanson. Hanson's mother was a maid for Lillian and became a close friend of hers. And his book is deeply researched, so I feel confident that the information in it is accurate.
Correct, yeah.
So, Lillian has her operation and remains in the hospital for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Once she was released, she settled back into her apartment at the Dorset with Bessie there by her side to keep her company. Obviously, Lillian has to take it easy. She's recovering. But she's still able to do some activities like go out to dinner, which is what she did on the evening of Saturday, October 6th. Lillian and Bessie were joined by two of Lillian's friends, Robert Neely, who was an executive for the soft drink brand Orangeade. It was popular in soda fountains at drugstores, and Joseph Whitehead Jr., heir to the Coca-Cola fortune.
Oh, fuck. I don't know why I said fork. Fark.
I liked it. Brief history on Coca-Cola. The recipe for the drink was created by a chemist named John Pemberton. When he died in 1888, Asa Candler bought the recipe from his estate and developed the company. Like Orangeade, the drink was offered in soda fountains around the country, and in 1899, Joseph Whitehead Sr. thought to himself, I think we could bottle this. He and a buddy went to Candler and pitched the bottling idea, and Candler sold them exclusive bottling rights for $1. $1. Whitehead Sr. builds a Coca-Cola plant in Atlanta and moves the whole family there. However, he died unexpectedly of pneumonia in 1906, and his widow took over the affairs, and eventually Joseph Whitehead Jr. and his brother Conkey, love the name, start running things. So these men that Lillian and Bessie are with are very wealthy men.
Yeah.
They're also married, but apparently that didn't mean anything back then.
Lillian, marriage was just this loose thing that you're like, all right.
Lillian and Joseph had also been lovers at one point. So the four of them dine out at Dinty Moore's restaurant. No connection to Dinty Moore beef stew. I did look it up.
Yes, I know exactly what that is.
Yep. Because when I read, I was like, oh my God, Dinty Moore beef stew. And I was like, I should maybe check on that. No, not connected. Dinty Moore's was in the heart of Broadway. It was a popular spot for celebrities, athletes, everyone who was anyone dined there. After a lovely dinner, the four of them all went back to Lillian's apartment. Edwin McCarthy, Joseph's brother-in-law, joined them there. Edwin was a shipping corporation executive, so another prominent, wealthy man. They're having a great time. They're just hanging out, and someone raises the question, what should we do next? Let's hit the town. And Edwin McCarthy says, what about the Chez Florence? The Chez Florence was a nightclub in Midtown Manhattan. And I hope I'm saying it right. So I'm going to go with Chez Florence.
How's it spelled?
Chez and then Florence.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got it. That's right.
All right. I second guessed myself. Lillian, still recovering from her surgery, said, I'm going to stay in, but you all go ahead, have the time of your lives. So Bessie leaves with the three men, which ends up being a fatal decision. 3
men and 1 woman.
We don't know if Bessie had planned to stay home with Lillian and Lillian had encouraged her to go out, or if she was just having a good time and wanted to keep it going. Regardless, she and the 3 men head to the club. They get to the Chez Florence, and it's poppin'. This was during Prohibition, and the nightclub scene was wild. Texas Guinan, known as the Queen of New York nightlife, ran several nightclubs, and police were always raiding them, closing them. It was kind of a farce, though, because as soon as the police left, the nightclubs reopened.
Yeah.
These clubs, as we've talked about before on here, were heavily frequented by the mob. So, of course, Texas was good friends with all these mobsters. Her brother, Tommy, keeping the business in the family, was running the Chez Florence.
Okay.
Bessie and the 3 men she was with are having a great night that goes well into Sunday morning. But then at one point, Robert Neely, he's the Orangeade guy, showed signs that he was about to pass out. Exactly what happens next is a compilation of eyewitness reports that can't be confirmed because witnesses contradicted each other. Some people police wanted to question afterwards could not be found, and others are most definitely lying.
Oh my God. What happened? You got me on the edge of my seat.
This is what we know for sure. Robert is showing signs he's about to pass out.
Gotcha.
Someone, the name of this person is not listed anywhere, poured ammonia into a glass and held it under Neely's nose. According to bystanders at the club, Bessie shouted, "Stop, you're burning him," and she pushed the glass away. Here's where it gets iffy. As she pushed the glass away, Tommy Guinan and two of his buddies, names unknown, joined in this commotion. Whitehead and McCarthy, the other two members in Bessie's party, had not been at the table when all of this occurred, supposedly. And when they returned, they found Bessie looking disheveled with blood pouring from her nose. She told them, "Tommy Guinan punched me in the face." Guinan denied this, saying that Bessie had gotten out of control and tipped over the table, like Thor style, just like, "Rawr!"
Those ankles, girl.
They're strong.
She kicked that. They flew across the room.
He said she tipped over the table and made everything spill all over the floor. He then went on to say that someone took a swing at him, he doesn't say who, and he, quote unquote, retaliated. Joseph Whitehead said that he and McCarthy were trying to protect Bessie when club personnel, names unknown, moved in and began beating the shit out of them. Bessie left with Whitehead and McCarthy, but Robert didn't go with him. Robert was the one about to pass out. Yeah. Maybe he did pass out.
Just pass out.
He's never mentioned again.
Okay, well, he passed away. And passed out, sorry.
If they tried to question him, he wasn't found or it's not reported.
Oh my gosh.
The guys take Bessie back to Lillian's apartment and then they leave. According to Lillian, Bessie was really upset and in a lot of pain. And Lillian's like, "Oh my God, what happened?" And she told Lillian, "Tommy Guinan punched me in the nose." Bessie went to bed, but when she woke up later that Sunday morning, she was still in a lot of pain. And it just seemed to get worse throughout the day.
Yikes.
What's creepy is she seemed to know deep down that her condition was not looking good because she wrote a letter to her mother, which reads, "Darling mother, I don't expect to die, but in case anything should happen, I have something to tell you. I have a son, 10 years old," which actually he would have been 11 by then,
okay,
"who now lives with a Mrs. Rose Holden, but I want you to take him and bring him up. W.C. Fields is his father. He is named William Rexford Fields Morris. He was born here in New York, and I fully believe that Bill," and she's meaning W.C., "will take care of him. But in case he does not, why make him? I did not tell you before because I know you could not do any good." There seems to be more printed in this letter. I'm sorry, there seems to be more to this letter, but it's not printed in this book.
Okay.
But she signs off with, "Goodbye, my darlings. If not here, I will see you in the next world."
Oh, shit. So she knew something was off.
Yeah. As Bessie's condition grew worse, Lillian summoned her personal physician, Dr. Harry Gilbert. He came and examined Bessie and determined her nose was fractured, and he gave her a sedative. But the next day, which was Monday, she wasn't any better. In fact, by that afternoon, she was having severe abdominal pains. And she told Lillian, and this is a quote, "Oh, Lillian, I'm going. I know I'm going." At 4 p.m., Lillian summoned Dr. Gilbert again, and he said, "We need to get her to the hospital immediately."
Yeah.
Once Bessie arrived at the hospital, she went into a coma, and she never woke up.
Oh, my God.
She died that night. So that evening, Dr. Gilbert told a reporter what he'd found when he examined Bessie initially, and that she'd had a fractured nose. But oddly, the next morning, he recanted that statement. He now said, "There were no marks of violence on her body, and she did not indicate she had met with any violence." On the death certificate, he listed her cause of death as acute myocarditis, which is inflammation of the heart muscle, and said she'd been suffering from alcoholism. Charles Norris, New York's chief medical examiner, who happened to be New York's first appointed chief ME and a pioneer in forensic toxicology, ordered an autopsy. Once he learned about the brawl in the club, he was like, "We need to look into this further." However, Bessie's body had already been whisked away to the Plaza Funeral Home and had been embalmed. And while you can technically still perform an autopsy after embalming, you can't really trust the results because The chemicals used in the embalming process are going to fuck with the body's chemistry. And testing for alcohol after embalming is unreliable.
Yeah.
Because the chemicals used in the process can mimic alcohol. So it's difficult to determine how much was consumed prior to death. So much for trying to determine anything from an autopsy. The media went wild. You have Lillian Lorraine, who's still a big name, even though her career was dwindling. You have 3 prominent, wealthy, married men. And you have a well-known nightclub figure, all somehow linked to the death of a former Ziegfeld Follies dancer.
Wow.
New York County District Attorney Joab Banton launched a criminal investigation into the case in which 12 people were to be questioned. But few could be found. It's as though people didn't want to talk.
Oh, yeah, it seems like
it's weird, right?
That's strange. God.
Police were able to speak with Joseph Whitehead and Edwin McCarthy, who stuck with their story that they were not around when everything went down. They just walked up to the table after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
They also confirmed that they'd been beaten by employees, or actually the word they used was pummeled. They were pummeled by employees, but oddly, they didn't know the names of any of them. I feel like if you've been pummeled, chances are you're gonna have bruising.
Yeah.
But there's no mention of either man having any signs of a beating. You know who did have signs of a beating? Bessie, according to the doctor's initial report. When Lillian Lorraine was questioned, she stated what she knew, which was what Bessie had told her, that Tommy Guinan had punched her in the nose. Tommy Guinan was questioned at great length by Chief Assistant District Attorney Ferdinand Pecora. But Guinan didn't have a whole lot to say, except that, no, he didn't run the Chez Florence. He's like, I don't own that club. I don't claim her. Literally every article about this case starts with, the incident took place at Tommy Guinan's Chez Florence. He's like, I don't know about all that.
And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Is that even a location?
He did say that he happened to stop by that night, but saw no drinking in a nightclub on a Saturday night in Midtown Manhattan. Mm-hmm. He said there was no brawl. He was like, everything was on the up and up, which contradicts the other report where he said Bessie flipped the table, someone swung at him, and he retaliated. Because to me, that sounds like a brawl.
Yeah.
One bit of info he did offer up that is particularly interesting is he admitted that after hearing Bessie had died, he made a phone call to Dr. Gilbert. Didn't say what they talked about, just mentioned he called out of curiosity. Was just like, hey, doc, heard that woman that didn't get punched at the club I don't own died. Like, what the fuck? It's wild.
Oh, brother, I can see where this is going.
A news item in the New York Times from October 16th, 1928, so a week after Bessie's death, stated that after speaking with Guinan, District Attorney Pecora announced that his investigation had established Bessie died from natural causes. He went on to say that the report that Lillian Lorraine had told a prosecutor about Bessie being punched by Guinan was incorrect. Pecora's boss, District Attorney Banton, said the report had been a misunderstanding between his office and the Homicide Bureau.
Sure.
The district attorney's office issued a statement that read, neither enough evidence nor witnesses could be found to bring the case before a grand jury, and the case would therefore be closed. Just as quickly as the story had taken over the papers, it disappeared. Bessie's parents believed she had been murdered. I don't think she was murdered, at least not intentionally, but I do think Guinan had the mob make the case go away. In the book by Nils Hanson, he writes that Lillian Lorraine never changed her story about the true identity of Bessie's assailants and injuries. However, I did find an article clipping that contradicts this, but I'll preface this by saying it was posted by some blogger. There's no citation. I have no idea what newspaper this came from, so who knows how legitimate it is, but it's worth mentioning.
Okay.
In the article, it says, this is a quote, Lillian Lorraine, Bessie's closest pal, gave her version of the affair. This is now Lillian speaking. Bessie, 2 gentlemen whom I won't name, and myself went out to dinner at Dinty Moore's Saturday night. As I am recuperating from a dangerous illness, I must be home early, so I had the gentleman take me home. Besides, I don't go in for the nightlife. The three of them went to Chez Florence. A dispute arose. I don't know what happened, and I am positive there are no eyewitnesses. The next thing, I heard of Bessie's death.
What?
It's weird. Contradicts a lot of other sources, and again, there is no citation.
No citation, okay.
And just a side note, Joseph Whitehead, former lover of Lillian, kind of disappeared from the spotlight for a while after the case was closed, but years later, he did trick his now estranged wife into signing over her rights to his $8 million estate. Just a little something. Just feels like everyone involved is shady. Bessie's dad, Louis, brought her body back to Onset, Massachusetts, where they held her funeral. In Bessie's will, she left W.C. Fields a ring. So, of course, reporters caught wind of this, and they're like, what is that about? What was your relationship to Bessie Poole? And W.C. said, there wasn't one. I don't know her. She left a card to a friend of hers in Massachusetts and left everything else to her mother, requesting that her mom give some token of her to her dad. She made no mention of her son, Bill. When W.C. Fields died in 1946, Bill Morris, so Bessie's son, with the help of Bessie's mom, filed a claim that he should receive part of the estate. And Bessie's mom had the letter Bessie had written her where she states Bill is W.C.'s son. I don't think she took Bill in from the holdings.
I was going to say, like, she didn't take him in.
I don't think so, at least not while he was in grade school. But clearly there was some communication between the two of them over the years because she was the one helping him to get some money.
Okay, so maybe she didn't want to take him away from what he had known.
Exactly. And he was awarded about $15,000. So at least he got a little something. Yeah. Unfortunately, we'll never have the full picture of what happened to Bessie. Maybe alcoholism was a factor, but there are cases where one punch has killed a person. Although it's unlikely a punch to the nose would be the sole cause of death, unless in the altercation she hit her head somehow, which is possible.
Right.
But then there's the abdominal pain, which a punch to the nose can cause you to swallow blood and cause an upset stomach, but she was in like severe pain.
It sounds like that it was more than just a punch to the face.
Something. I read a report that alleged she died of alcohol poisoning, which is a possibility, although I find it unlikely if she had alcohol poisoning that she would have had the strength and wherewithal to pin that letter to her mother.
Yeah.
I had a glass of champagne and a glass of wine at dinner the other night, and I was worthless until lunch the next day. And if she did drink as much as it's reported she did, they're saying she's a confirmed alcoholic. I find it hard to believe that one night out would be her tipping point, because I would think she would have a pretty high tolerance. I don't know.
Yeah. Something else happened there.
Yeah.
We don't know.
We'll never know. But let us know what you think.
Yeah.
On Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or Spotify at
Horrorwood Podcast.
I also want to say thank you to the people who've been leaving us reviews lately. It means everything. Yay. Thank you so much. And you can email us at
horrorwoodpodcast@gmail.com.
Or you can jump on over to Patreon if you have a little spare change, and that can be done at
patreon.com/horrorwoodpodcast.
And we'll see you next time.
Dance on out of here.
Boop, 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 ba-doop, ba-doop.
Cha.